DE Conversations is here with Philip Olmesdahl from Saota, all the way from South Africa. Philip, it's a fantastic privilege to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us in New Zealand, and we're very excited to have you here, so thank you for coming.
Thanks, Rich.
Tell us about Saota and maybe the story that sits behind your practice.
So the practice is about 34 years old. We're based in Cape Town, South Africa. Joke with some of the guys in the practice and talk to some of our clients. We just completely dedicated to the work that we do, thoroughly enjoy the opportunities that we've had. The practice has come from probably a couple of decades of predominantly single residential. The last probably 15 to 20 years has really broadened out into a much broader type of project. Along with that is also great opportunities to work abroad and travel to places like this and much further abroad. We're fortunate to have a lot of work going pretty much from east to west. We quite nicely spread. Again, predominantly residential work, but commercial, residential developments to single residential to hospitality and all sorts of things.
One of the things that I found really endearing on your website was that you talk about the idea of the spirit of inquiry.
The practice has come from residential work. I think residential work is demanding. I think all projects, have a set of demands, but residential work particularly, and especially working in different regions, I think to really be successful at projects, you have to, go beyond what's obvious. You have to go beyond what your client's telling you. You have to go beyond what maybe is even initially foreseen in a project's, objective. And that inquiry, I think, makes projects better. But these days as well, I think the market is incredibly competitive. I think there are so many opportunities with things like technology. There's so many critical things to make projects more successful, more cost-effective, more meaningful, more relevant. And I think the whole time, all of that really revolves around how much you are questioning, what you're doing.
Given the number of people that you have in your practice, I think you mentioned earlier it was 300. How do you select your teams for the projects as they come up? What's the process that you work through to develop that?
We're not too democratic. The seniors in the studio, the principals and the senior and all the associate groups are all very, very active in design. We think we actually design addicts. We just, when we get new projects, we're so excited to talk about them. We're excited to investigate which direction they're going in, and we're super excited, from all levels that are involved in the project team are excited to get involved. The teams aren't really selected more than there are a number of principals. The principals each have project groups. The project groups are broken down into project teams. So each principal works with between 35 and 45 people, and the principals group works in a particular region. So we've got American teams, European teams, Far East teams. Some of the teams are a little bit more divided. They handle a collection of smaller regions that combine to make about the same kind of territory, which is great because it means that we can obviously get to know particular regions and the cultural nature of those regions, the climatic characteristics of those regions, obviously the opportunities and build understanding of costs and so on.
I know that you're really big users of technology at a design level, obviously a structural sort of level that we talked about before, but also from a client-facing level.
Yeah.
Can you give us some examples of how it is that you use the technology to be able to kind of cater to all those needs?
The most fundamental is that the practice probably only does about 5% of our work in South Africa. And so why I say that is that, for probably, 20 plus years now, it hasn't quite been that proportion, but it's been heading that way. So everything that we do has been devised around having presentations and developing the project in an iterative way, but in a way that frequently doesn't even need us to present. The designs are so well documented, so visually documented that clients, specifically if they're in different time zones, can go through key presentations, limited input from ourselves. They can work through documents after online presentations and make decisions, themselves. So that was a key thing, getting over the logistics of, not being able to meet your client regularly over a coffee, doing it all online, or doing it all, when, as I said, when you're not in the same time zone. As projects have become more demanding, projects have become more sophisticated, and clients have also become more equipped to have sophisticated interfaces. We have gone on to things like VR. where we use VR quite a lot in our studio. We've got 4 or 5 setups in our studio in Cape Town where teams can come in and use them at very early stages, when it's a super rudimentary model, just to walk around the model. 2 people can go in at once and you can get a great sense of things. And whilst you're in the model, you can swap out finishes, you can swap out time of day, you can move things around. So it really is an incredible environment to work in at an early stage. But predominantly we're finding we're working at sort of towards the end of the design concept stage, often into the design development stage. And even when we go into documentation, we do things like clash detection in VR, which is incredibly effective, super quick, very good for training. You put a group of staff in the room with you, a couple of you go into a model, it's on screens and you can talk through what you're seeing and things. And so that's incredibly helpful.
The stuff that Saota does is so amazing to look at, and it just looks like such incredible vast projects. I'd love to know who your influences are and perhaps what your favourite piece of architecture is in the world.
I've heard that people say that you can see a Saota building and it's handwriting, but at the same time there's a lot of variation from project to project. And I think that is because we deliberately try and respond to where we're working and create buildings that are right for the place and obviously right for a particular brief. And then there's a lot of opportunities and autonomy for the key designers and the key role players on projects. So we really take, I think that's one of the strengths in the project is that they do vary. From my point of view personally, I couldn't say that I have a particular architect that really stands out for me. I mean, I think the older you get in your career, you battle to separate the quality of work and the actual backstory. I think these days I'm really intrigued by practices that are actually major commercial successes and practices that are at real scale but still do very relevant projects. And I think probably 20 or 30 years ago there were very few. And if you were really commercially successful and if you're really at a scale, that was almost like something that practices didn't get any credibility. I think that's changed a lot, and I think these days large scale practices are doing such phenomenal work. I think they are much more well structured. I think they're pushing the boundaries in terms of the way they're working with things like sustainability and appropriateness of design and working in global markets and things. So for me, probably they're commercial practices that are standouts for me.
How do you separate, I guess, having the experience and the skill to know how it is that something's going to be in the future? How do you separate that from what it is that your client specifically wants at that exact moment in time?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. What we try and do is we tend to approach projects, I think, slightly differently to a lot of practices. And I don't know if that's just because we're a collection of architects that have all had similar interests and pursuits, or if it's because of the nature of practicing and growing up from quite a small practice in South Africa that's got a very limited kind of level of opportunities. And what I mean by that is we've always naturally single residential projects is where we've had the majority of our work. And in the single residential projects in South Africa, it's meant that you really, as an architect, have to do everything. You got to have a great idea about design. You got to have a great idea about how your building responds to landscape. You got to have a pretty good idea about technology and the opportunities that you can achieve with technology. And you've even got to have a good understanding of interiors and so on. And I think from that, and that's certainly the sort of pedigree of all the principals and the senior team, behind Saota, has resulted in us having a very good all-round understanding of what makes a space successful and emotive and really, kind of life-affirming in terms of an experience. And I think that we've, I hope, really acknowledged in the work that we do, and we understand how to bring that to projects. And the key really for us is now to train, to bring that to our teams and to upscale it to the projects that we get opportunities to work on now.
What are you seeing as the latest trends? What are the next things that are coming in the market in terms of architecture and design?
Probably the most significant, I think, is just the way, because of changing work patterns, that's changing the environment of being away from home, and it's certainly changing the home environment. We've, since COVID, of course, made a huge amount of changes in the way that our business works. We work remotely. We still have a studio, but it's essentially the majority of our staff work remotely. And that's of course impacting on most of the home designs. I think people are understanding different ways of working, whether or not they go in a couple of days a week in a more hybrid arrangement, and that's changing homes a lot. I think that's great. I think there's obviously parameters to set in terms of not letting your work life drift too much into your home life. But certainly all of our clients and a lot of our clients, of course, are successful business people, are seeing much more of a work from home environment. Great kind of sanctuary spaces at home to work, spaces that also are work spaces, but also are spaces that their families can kind of get together and spend time together whilst work is kind of more merged into their daily life. I think the same thing is on the business side. Business side, we since COVID, we actually, probably a little bit unpopular to say that business has actually got better. I think both privately, I think there are a lot more people putting in effort to their homes, on the smaller scale, just home renovations and things like that. And on major scale, there are a lot of developers all over the world. We're finding that resi developments have had a major upswing.
Philip, thank you so much. It's a real privilege to have you here, and we're really excited to hear what you've got to say this week and spend some time together. So thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity.